car on the screen, chances are you have already made your choice. You do not want to live in the current financial matrix. In this presentation, I will explain to you a blueprint for a new monetary system that is fair and logical. Please bear with me. It takes about 50 minutes to do that. I wish I can do it faster, but not everything is a short TikTok video. But first, let me congratulate you, as you will soon be unplugged from the corrupt matrix. I must warn you, though, that once you get to know the correct way of creating money, it is hard to live life as usual. If you have not watched yet part 1 of this presentation on this channel, I strongly encourage you to do so in order to understand why do we need a new monetary system. Why is this topic of such great importance? Because all current and previous money creation methods are wrong. You will understand why by the time you finish watching this video. In this new value-based monetary system that we will present now, money is not created by governments or banks at will. It is created by those who create value, because honest money must represent real value. Now let's get started. How can we create money the correct way? First, we have to highlight certain aspects of bartering because it teaches us very important lessons about money that we don't pay attention to. Here's a simple barter example. You have Peter and John. Peter has apples and John has oranges. In their prefrontal cortex, they assigned a value for their products. Their assessment could be subjective or objective. Subjectively, they concur that both apples and oranges are delicious fruits. Objectively, they estimated that it requires about the same amount of time and effort to cultivate and harvest the fruits. So they're more or less equal in value. And since Peter wanted oranges and John wanted apples, they could simply exchange these products. So what just happened here highlights 3 fundamental aspects of bartering. 1, the transaction is direct exchange of value where no currency is used or created. 2, the transaction is transparent, not obscured by a currency with unclear or uncertain value. 3, there was a consensus on value between these two individuals. The consensus on value is a very important attribute in this form of exchange, and we will be referring to it later in our discussion on value. We will discover how we can find a consensus on value on millions of products with the entire population being involved, not just with 2 people. We will evaluate a system where you use currency for transactions while keeping in mind how the same transaction would have been executed had it been through bartering. Let's consider a little more complicated example of barter. Here you have Peter and Mary. Peter has 20 apples and Mary has nothing. But she offers Peter a jar of apple jam in exchange for his 20 apples. Peter agrees and the exchange takes place. Note that the jam is a more complex product than the primary product, which is apples. But unlike the previous example with Peter and John where the apple was equivalent to the orange, here the jar of apple jam is not equivalent to the 20 apples. Mary just needed 10 apples to make the jar of jam, and the remaining 10 were her profit. Now Mary can keep these 10 apples or trade them for corn with someone else, or she can make another jar of apple jam and sell it to someone else in exchange for a hammer. Delta apples, which is the total apples minus Mary's cost, is 10, which is Mary's profit, and it represents a measurement of the added value that Mary created with her more complex product, which is in turn a measurement of the value of the energy that Mary put to make the jam. Note that all value originates from primary production, including the apparent added value in the complex product. Without the primary product, that is the 20 apples, there would have been no value at all. You may say, okay, this is basic early human economics, but how is it relevant to modern advanced economies in complex trade? Let's find that out in the next example. This last example demonstrates a much more complex form of barter trade that is actually very relevant to modern economies. Consider the case of Peter who has metal, John has plastic, Mary has rubber, and Steve has paint, and Ford has nothing. However, Ford offers to make a car for each one of these primary product makers in exchange for their products. For simplification purposes, we will assume that a car is made only of these 4 components, where A represents metal, B represents plastic, C represents rubber, and D represents paint, and Z represents the car. In order to make 4 cars, one for each primary producer, Ford will need 4 times the amount of product. But in this case, he will make no profit. Therefore, he asked for 5 times the amount of primary product to make 5 cars. So he can give 1 car to each one of his suppliers, that is the primary producers, and he gets to keep 1 car as his profit. Here, delta cars is the total number of cars made minus the cars he needed to give his suppliers, and 1Z would be his profit, which also represents the added value that he created by making this complex product. Note that the profit or the presumed added value is variable, as Ford could have negotiated better terms and maybe his delta was 3 cars instead of 1. Delta must always be greater than 0. Otherwise, it's not economically feasible to produce this complex product unless you are using slaves or volunteers. The upper limit of delta is dictated by the profitability of primary production. So delta Z may be 6 or 10, but it cannot be unlimited. Again, you can notice that all value comes from primary production, including the presumed added value. An important thing to remember is that a complex product does not necessarily have more added value than its individual components. In many cases, and for many people, a car may be of more added value than just having plastic or metal, but not for everyone. For example, someone living in a rugged mountain terrain, such as a Sherpa in the Himalayas, the car might be useless. One of its individual components, such as metal to make pickaxes and shovels, has more value to him. This example we just presented applies to any complex product, be it a computer, a spaceship, or anything else. Let's use the information we just learned from barter trade to help us design a system where money is created correctly. So, one, we have to understand what is the origin of all value. Where does all value come from? You may not be familiar with the answer since no economist ever mentions this. If you noticed, in the last few slides, we actually proved without any doubt that primary products are the origin of all value. And any value created later on in the economy is made of primary products, or is a service directly or indirectly dependent on primary products, and is ultimately being exchanged for it. One may say, but I'm a doctor or I'm a teacher, and the value I create is independent of primary products. And you would be totally wrong in saying that, because any value you produce as a doctor or as a teacher is dependent on primary products. Your entire existence as a doctor or teacher depends on primary products. You eat food to be alive. The stethoscope, the scalpel, the pen, the paper you use are all dependent on primary products. I hope this is clear now and we can move on. Primary products are the source of absolutely all value, period. So that was one. Two, we have to create a system where we can have consensus on the value for each specific primary product. Three, we have to be able to disburse with a B currency when you create value. Four, we have to be able to disperse with a P currency when you circulate value. Five, we have to eliminate currency when you consume value. Six, we have to define the unit of account properly. Seven, we have to apply the system globally since supply chains are interconnected across the world, and therefore we will be using only one unit of account, one universal currency with clear value. This is the only way that would level the playing field for all primary producers across the planet to compete fair and square. No tricks, no currency manipulation. Everyone plays by the same exact rules and uses the same unit of measurement in trade. Let's demonstrate how the system of value works. The system is represented by this donut shape. In this example, we have four primary producers. Peter has Apple, which is a primary product, and has a certain value, and he will be holding it in the system. In return, the system will issue new currency V to Peter. Similarly, Mary has pears, and she holds it in the system. In return, the system disperses new currency to Mary. The same goes for Tina with her metal bar, and for John with his sheep or meat. Now we have completed the disbursement of value, disbursement with a B. So what happens next? How do we disperse value in the system? Disperse with a P. Let's say there's an electrician, and Peter needs electric work done. He can hire this electrician and pay him with the currency that has been issued to him earlier. Similarly, if you have a plumber, and Mary needs plumbing work done, then she can pay the plumber with the currency that was issued to her earlier. If Tina wants to buy a computer, she pays for it, and if John wants to buy a car, he pays for it. In this fashion, we start dispersing currency in the system. Keep in mind that the primary products, the apples, the pears, the metal bar, and the sheep, are all held in the system for the same exact value, for the same exact price, which is the amount of currency that was dispersed to the primary producers. So what happens next? If the electrician wants to buy a metal bar, he'll buy it through the system, but since the system does not need that currency, it was just acting an intermediary in the trade process. So logically, the currency has no value at this point, and is therefore eliminated from the system. It's permanently destroyed. Similarly, if the plumber wants sheep, he can buy it through the system, and the system will eliminate the currency. And if the car manufacturer wants apples, he'll buy it, and the system eliminates currency. And if the computer manufacturer wants pears, he pays with the currency that he has, and the system permanently eliminates it. You may have noticed that we just created a system that bypasses barter trade, but leads more or less to a similar outcome. No currency exists when all transactions are completed. Let me show you this analogy from the economy of nature. Mother Nature is brilliant. Our system of value actually mimics how nature works. Let me explain. Inside those leaves is a production factory, the largest and most important production factory on Earth. The energy of the sun is converted into a chemical energy known as adenosine triphosphate or ATP, which is a universal currency that the entire biological ecosystem uses to perform any work. Nothing would exist on Earth without that energy. No plants, no animals, and thus no human economy without it. Everything is dependent on it. ATP is the energy which is the currency that living things use to pay for work done inside the cells, the factories of life. This is how forests and meadows come into existence. In this picture, you can see the sun, which is providing energy to the plants so they can grow and multiply. And this energy is transferred to the deer, which feeds on them. In turn, the energy is transferred to the mountain lion, which feeds on the deer. And finally, the energy is transferred to the decomposers, which feed on all of them. Classically, we think of plants as producers, herbivores as consumers, carnivores as consumers, and decomposers as consumers. But if you think about it more carefully, you can consider plants as primary producers because they produce the primary product in the economy. You can think of deer as secondary producers because they produce the meat for the mountain lion, which is also a tertiary producer in the economy because it produces energy for the decomposers, which are the final consumers. So as you can observe, it all starts with plants, and there is no economy without them. They will not grow and multiply without the energy from the sun, and in turn, no animals can exist, grow, or multiply without feeding on them. All living things exist because of the energy transferred from primary producers. You can see how nature clearly shows us the way of how to correctly create currency. The only thing that needs to be done is to issue new currency to primary producers, and this will power the rest of the economy. So in our human economy, we could replace the sun with a system of value, which disburses currency only to primary producers, and the currency gets dispersed afterwards. Let's focus on the human economy. In this ecosystem, we also have many primary producers. Let's take the example of one of them, iron miners. We have secondary producers that depend on them to exist at all. These would be the pipe makers. And we have tertiary producers, such as plumbers, which depend on both of them to exist in the economy. I want to emphasize that the pipe maker would not have existed in the economy without the iron miner, and a plumber would not have existed in the economy if there were no pipes and wrenches so he can do his job. So there's an obligatory hierarchy in the economy that starts with primary producers. We also have consumers of primary, secondary, and tertiary products. For example, a homeowner is a consumer of iron, pipes, and the services of the plumber. But at the same time, that homeowner must be a producer of something to be actually part of the economy. He could be a teacher or a baker. So how do we correctly create a currency so that the constituents of this economy can use to transfer the value they create, their energy? We create a system of value which issues currency, which quantifies value to the primary producer in the economy, just like the sun was giving currency only to the primary producer, and in that case, it was the plants, and that currency, that energy, was simply transferred to other members in that ecosystem. In our example, the primary producer, the iron maker, the secondary producer, the pipe maker, the tertiary producer, the plumber, all of these are also consumers. So they can buy the bread from the baker or hire a teacher for their kid, and the currency that was initially issued to the primary producer will be circulating in the economy because they all have to pay for their needs and wants. Let's recap what we have accomplished so far. We have determined the origin of all value. We have learned how to disburse and disperse value in the form of currency V, but we still have to figure out how to determine the value of primary products. That's the next thing on our plate. How do we determine the value of any element, molecule, compound, or product? It's not that difficult if you approach it logically. First, look at the periodic table of the elements and ask yourself, does aluminum have more value than iron? Does gold have more value than lithium? Does silicon have more value than uranium? Does oxygen have more value than carbon? You would quickly realize that it's difficult to answer any of these questions with any degree of certainty because each one of these elements possess a unique value, a unique attribute. What about molecules or compounds? Consider the case of Peter, who has rice, and Mary, who has uranium. Value for their products can be determined objectively, subjectively, and relativistically, both in time and in location. There are two ways by which Peter and Mary can objectively assess the value of their product. The first objective way is by determining the hours of work needed to plant and harvest the rice, or to mine for uranium. The second objective way is by determining the usefulness of these two products in terms of the energy they can produce. Rice can provide energy to power humans, uranium can provide energy for machines. Subjectively, they can assess value based on whether they like the taste or the texture of rice. Or maybe Peter prefers stainless steel or titanium to make a pot for cooking, not uranium that could expose him to radiation. Maybe he is allergic to rice and he would rather have beans. Relativistically, with respect to time, 200 years ago, there was no value for uranium since there was no way to make good use of it. Relativistically, with respect to location, a small island with a small population, they cannot use uranium or need to use it even in the present time, since they do not need to make a nuclear bomb or nuclear power plant to power their island. This slide shows roughly the current prices in US dollars for different products. But where did these values come from? Let's simplify this slide and just show three products and make a comparison among them. Oil, for example, is used to power cars, trains, boats, planes, and heat your home. Uranium, on the other hand, 1 kilogram of it can produce 24 million kilowatt hours of energy, equivalent to burning 3 million kilograms of coal, and can power 6,666 average households for 1 year. Then why is gold almost 700 times more expensive than uranium? You cannot power anything with it, neither machine nor man. Why is one Bitcoin valued at $100,000? Because people are uncertain about value in general, and they try to find ways to protect whatever value they possess. They realize that our current monetary system is flawed at best, but they do not know what else to do. They're unable to value things reasonably or find a safe store of value. They do not have good alternatives, but our system of value will solve that problem. Now back to our critical question. How do we determine value of primary products? We have to reflect on the lessons we have learned in barter trade. In the example of Peter and John in an earlier slide, they both reach a consensus on value for two simple products, the apple and the orange. In the example of Peter and Mary, they also reach a consensus on value for a simple product and a more complex product, the apple and the apple jam. In the example of Ford and the 4 suppliers for his car manufacturing, 5 people reach a consensus on value for several primary products to make a very complex product, the car. So the answer is clear. We have to reach a consensus on value to set an acceptable value for any primary product. And yes, we can reach that consensus on a global scale with millions of primary producers on millions of primary products. Remember, we are doing this only for primary products. Final products are not a concern at all. Their value or price is determined by the free market. Final products are made of individual primary products, but they have nothing to do with the process of determining value for primary products. Later on in this video, we will discuss the quantity theory of money, and you will understand why the value or price of final products is irrelevant, and how currency created as a result of primary products will determine the value of everything else. Consider primary product X. In our system of value SOV, all primary producers will participate in a bid by offering a price for it in V, the unit for the universal currency, which we will talk about later. An automated computer algorithm will accept only the bids that are equal to or less than the median price. We use the median instead of the mean because in a normal distribution, the mean equals the median. But in a skewed distribution, the median is less affected by extremes than the mean. Hence, the median is the most logical choice. In this example, the median was 7V. So all primary producers who offer the price of 7V or less will have their bid accepted, and they will all receive the median price 7V, not less if they offered less. They all receive 7V and new currency will be disbursed to them for that amount. And those who offer the bid greater than 7V will have their offer rejected because they are either too greedy or inefficient. Now, because there are potentially hundreds, thousands, or millions of primary producers for each primary product, then their competition should yield a reasonable median value for that primary product that will represent its true value. However, the system will also still set up an upper limit N to prevent any unusual or deliberate abuse. The SOV's upper limit on a primary product value is part of the consensus mechanism, because the operating body of the SOV, which we will discuss later, and who votes on the upper limit represents the vote of the entire human population, not just the primary producers. The consensus on value will be guided by the unit of account, which we'll discuss shortly. Primary producers are guided by that unit of account, and the operating body for the SOV guarantees that guidance with its upper limit on value only for primary products. The SOV would have a complete data maze of all primary products with their respective grades. The grade of a product is very important. For example, grade 1 rice will not participate in a bid with grade 3 rice because it would not be fair. They are two different products. Now, how much would each primary producer be able to sell, and therefore how much V can he earn in a bid? The total amount of the primary products that is needed is divided by the number of the producers who won the bid. For example, in this table, 6 primary producers won the bid. Therefore, you divide 100% by 6, and that will be 16.6%. So each primary producer will be able to sell 16.6% of the amount needed. Let's take another example. If 2,000 tons are needed and 200 producers won the bid for a particular primary product, then each can sell 10 tons through the SOV and earn its value in V. In a later slide, we'll explain how the SOV determines what is the amount needed for any particular primary product in any particular bid. A very important element in any monetary system is the unit of account. We're going to use a universal unit of account, a universal currency. So what is 1V? A unit of account must be understandable. That is, most, if not all, people must understand what it means. It should also be relevant. Therefore, it should relate to something they need on a daily basis. So what is more relevant and understandable than saying that 1 unit of currency V is equivalent to the energy needed to keep 1 human alive for 1 day? Meaning, if you earn 1 V per day, then you can stay alive for 1 day. This is a very easy concept for everyone to understand. We can say that 1 V is the cost of 1 kilogram of a theoretical product we will call Bricev, which can keep a human alive for 1 day. In reality, however, we don't have exactly a primary product like the theoretical Bricev, but we have close enough products. Wheat, rice are such products, where 1 kilogram of these products can provide the energy needed for 1 human for 1 to 2 days, depending on their physical characteristics and energy consumption. So 1 kilogram of wheat or rice serves as an approximation to 1 kilogram of Bricev. It does not have to be a perfect equivalent. An approximation is good enough. Note that currently wheat, rice, and maize constitutes 2/3 of the total human food consumption. 1 V will be divisible into 10 equal parts. Every 10 small V's equal 1 V. So the value of any product can be 1V, 2V, 3V, up to the nth V. In the next few slides, we'll be using a few acronyms, so let's go ahead and define them. First, we have the EIT. These are the economy initiating transactions. So this is the first set of transactions when the SOV would become active. These are transactions that will create new money. This is where money is being disbursed with a B by the SOV to primary producers. And then we have the EAT. These are economy augmenting transactions, which are similar to the EIT. They are just those happening after the initial set of transactions. That is why we refer to them as augmenting versus initiating transactions. Then we have regular transactions, RT. These are transactions between any person or entity which are directly paying each other, and they do not involve any new money creation. They are using existing money created in an EAT or EIT. So regular transactions disperse with a P the money that's already been created. And finally, we have terminating transactions, TT. These are transactions that eliminate consumed value. They destroy created currency. This will happen when consumers actually buy the primary products which the SOV initially created new money for through the bidding process discussed earlier. When a primary product is sold, the money that represented its value should cease to exist because money would have served its purpose as an intermediary in the cycle. This table shows us how money circulates in the economy and is eventually eliminated from circulation once primary products are sold. You can see that in transaction number 1, which is an EIT, an economic initiating transaction, new money was disbursed for the amount of 100 V to the farmer. Then in transaction number 2, which is a regular transaction, the farmer starts spending the money, thus circulating it in the economy. So he paid the gas station 20 V. In transaction number 3, he paid the plumber 10 V. In transaction number 4, he paid the dentist 30 V. In transaction number 5, he paid the school 40 V. In transaction number 6, the school paid the plumber 20 V. In transaction number 7, the gas station paid the plumber 20 V. In transaction number 8, the plumber paid the dentist 50 V. In transaction number 9, the dentist paid the school 100V. And in transaction number 10, the school paid his teachers 100V. If you notice that so far in all of these transactions, the balance at the end, at the bottom, is always 100V. So what happens at transaction number 11? Why is the balance 0? Because this is a terminating transaction, meaning that the primary product have been sold from the SOV, which means in this case that the teachers bought the wheat from farmer number 1, and since his primary product is effectively sold and removed from the system, then so will the money that represented its value. It will be removed from the system as well. This table is another example of how the money circulates in the economy. You can see that transaction number 1 is an EAT, an economy augmenting transaction, where new money was created. So the SOV disbursed 100B to the uranium producer. In transaction number 2, the uranium producer paid 40B to his mine workers. In transaction number 3, he paid 30B to buy some heavy machinery. In transaction number 4, he paid the government 30B. You could call this paying his taxes, or more appropriately, it should be called paying the government for the services it provided him. Because in this ecosystem, in this economy, the government acts as a service provider, providing security, a legal system, or whatever other services that the citizens are willing to fund from their own real money. In transaction number 5, the mine workers also paid the government 20B. In transaction number 6, the mine workers paid the nuclear power plant for the energy it provided to their homes. In transaction number 7, the heavy machine operator paid the nuclear power plant to power his factory. So what happens in transactions number 8 and 9? These are terminating transactions. In transaction number 8, you can see that 50V were eliminated from circulation because the government paid 50V to buy the uranium held in the SOV from that primary producer, maybe to make a nuclear bomb. So once that uranium is effectively sold, the system eliminates the currency associated with it. In transaction number 9, another 50V were eliminated because the nuclear power plant bought the uranium from the uranium producer, hence currency was eliminated. Let's summarize what we have learned so far about our system of value, SOV. In the SOV, primary production is the ultimate source of all value. This is why currency issuance is based solely on primary production. Consensus of value for a primary product is what determines its value. Currency from primary production is transferred to every sector in the economy. Every V created and destroyed is accounted for in real time in the SOV, so it serves as an instantaneous universal digital ledger. And there you have it, a universal currency. Every entity registered in the SOV will have a 13-digit account number with additional sub-accounts if needed, whether it's an individual, an organization, or a government. Primary products, in turn, will also have unique 13-digit numbers followed by additional numbers that act as specifiers and will be part of the identity of every V generated. Every new V created is unique and is tagged to the account number of a primary producer and to the particular primary product that it was created from. These that are created are numbered in chronological order of creation, starting with 1, followed by the account number of the primary producer, followed by the primary product number with all of its specifiers, followed by the unit number of that product. In this example, the account number of the primary producer is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11. And his primary products number is also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 with specifiers 9, 3, 1. You also have 2 units of this primary products, units 1 and 2. The unit could be different for different products, but let's say the unit here is 1 kilogram of apples, and if 1 kilogram of apple is worth 0.5 big V or 5 small V's, then you can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 small V's are created for the first unit, and then another small 5 V's for the second unit. So that particular primary producer will be issued 10 small V's, which is equal to 1 big V, for the units of primary products that he produced and were accepted in the bid he made in the SOV. An important feature of the SOV is that a primary producer cannot participate in EAT until 50% of what he supplied in the previous EAT or EIT is sold through the SOV. If a primary producer is not selling his primary product, then he cannot keep participating in EAT and earn new money without selling anything. He cannot reward someone just for producing. He has to be selling what he produces. He has to sell at least 50% of the primary product that earned him the new money in a previous EAT so that the SOV would allow him to participate again in the new EAT. Know that all primary products are essential products and will be consumed, so they will all sell. We'll elaborate more on this in future slides. What this table shows us are different primary producers. We have primary producer number 1, primary producer number 2, and primary producer number 3. Here, primary producer number 1 has 3 primary products. Primary producer number 2 has 1 product, and primary producer number 3 has 1 product. Since primary producer number 1 earned 20V for primary product number 1, and he sold what is worth 11V, which means he sold more than 50% of the particular primary product, then he can participate in a new AT. But for primary product number 2, he cannot participate in a new AT because he sold less than 50%. And for primary product number 3, he can participate because more than 50% are sold. As for primary producer number 2, he cannot participate because he barely sold anything. And primary producer number 3, he can participate in new AT because he sold 50% of that product. So how much of each primary product will the SOV accept at any time? How will the EIT or the EAT be initiated? Well, it's simple. Just find out what is the normal annual demand for the primary product. What is normal? For the time being, we will say that the normal is the actual current annual global consumption, the AGC. This table shows close enough numbers to the real current annual consumption. At baseline, the SOV will always maintain the supply of primary products at the annual global consumption value. So whenever the amount goes below that value, then automatically and instantaneously an EAT is triggered by the system to replenish that product and restore it to its baseline quantity. And thus new money will be created as a result of such EAT, which would replace the consumed or eliminated money. So in this table, natural latex and titanium are already at their maximum allowed quantity, therefore no EAT will be triggered for these products. Whereas for the rest of the products, wheat, iron, and natural gas, EATs will be triggered to restore their amount back to the value of AGC. This mechanism will have extremely important consequences, as we will explain shortly. Note that the money supply can be controlled by what value we set for the AGC. Also note that the money supply is determined by the economy of production, by the production of real value. It's not created by central banks, private banks, crypto miners, or by Augustus Caesar. This mechanism presented here kills 2 birds in 1 stone. First, we are maintaining adequate primary product supply, and second, we are creating money simultaneously. So what is the total amount of currency that can be generated in the economy? If you recall, AGC is the annual global consumption. The ACP is the annual currency production, which is the value of the AGC. The total amount of primary products consumed annually, AGC, is equal to the sum of the individual products consumed. That is P1 plus P2 plus P3, and so on. The total value of the primary products consumed annually is the annual currency production, ACP, which is the sum of the individual primary products multiplied by their value, N. So P1 times N1 plus P2 times N2 plus P3 times N3, and so on. To give you an idea of how much money can be generated from production alone, assume P1 represents all food products combined, and N1 is their value in V. If you recall, from the definition of the unit of account, we need 1 big V to keep 1 human being alive for 1 day. So multiply that by the days of the year, then multiply that by the number of people on the planet, which is 8 billion. You end up with about 3 trillion V generated annually from primary food products alone. That's at minimum. What would the quantity theory of money predict would happen if our currency creation model is applied? QTM can be represented by the equation MV equal PY, where M is the money supply, V is the velocity of money, or how often money circulates or changes hands. Don't confuse this velocity V with our unit of currency V with double strike through. P is the price level and Y is the real output, which is the final goods and services produced in the economy. QTM assumes that V and Y are constant. So here we just replace the V with K1 and Y with K2 to signify that they are constants. In the SOV, the money supply equals the total amount of currency produced, V total, which is equal to the ACP, the annual currency production. The annual currency production is the value of the AGC, the annual global consumption, as we mentioned previously. But AGC is almost constant, and the value of the individual components of the AGC are also expected to be relatively constant, given the 2 levels of moderation it is subjected to. 1 being the median cost rule used in the bids for primary products, and 2 is the upper limit N on primary products. So if the ACP is relatively constant and V and Y are constant, then the price should remain constant. So now we represent the money supply with K3 to show that P must also be constant. Let's consider a scenario where Y is not constant. So if the money supply is constant but Y increases, that is, more final goods and services are produced in the economy, then the prices should fall, but the SOV has a mechanism that can mitigate that. The ACP can be increased by increasing the set value for the AGC. So if we want to keep the prices constant, then we can go above the baseline for the AGC. That is, we allow more primary products to be accepted by the SOV in 1 year. You can call this AGC plus. However, Y is hard to increase due to the 1 year limitation on the primary products that is Y made of. What if the opposite happens? What if Y decreases? That is, the final output shrinks. Then prices are expected to increase. Well, in a similar fashion, if Y decreases, then the ACP can be decreased in proportion to that by decreasing the set value for the AGC. That is, we allow less primary products to be accepted by the SOV. That is less than the baseline of the annual global consumption. We can call this AGC minus. Now let's consider a situation where the velocity of money is not constant. So if the money supply is constant but the velocity increases, that is, the money circulates faster, then the prices are expected to rise. Hence, the ACP in this case can be decreased by decreasing the set value for AGC. But if the opposite happens, that is, the velocity decreases, money circulates slower, then the prices are expected to decrease. So the ACP here can be increased proportionally by increasing the set value for the AGC. At baseline, the annual global production, AGP, is the same thing as the annual global consumption. So how much do we need to adjust the annual global production to affect the annual currency production if there's a need to do so for some reason, as we suggested in the previous slides? For simplification purposes, we're going to assume that the daily currency production, DCP, is about 100 billion V, 8 billion from primary food products, and the remaining 92 billion from other primary production sectors. If we allow 10 extra days of primary products to enter the SOV, or 10 less days from the baseline of 365 days, this will result in an increase or decrease in the annual currency production by 2.7%. In Table 9.2, we made the change to be 20 days, and this gives us 5.6% increase or decrease in the currency production annually. In Table 9.3, we made the change to be 30 days from baseline, and this will result in an increase or decrease by 8.5% in the annual currency production. So allowing 30 days more or 30 days less of primary products to enter the SOV will increase or decrease the annual currency production by a significant amount. So how would the supply and demand curves look like in the SOV? On the vertical axis, we have the prices, and on the horizontal axis, we have the supply quantity. As expected, as the prices increase, the supply quantity increases. So the sellers will make more money. And as the prices decrease, the supply quantity decreases. But in the previous slides, we learned that in the SOV, the price is relatively constant. So that blue line would actually be much narrower in the SOV and is represented by the yellow line. The demand curve will show us something similar. As the prices decrease, the demand quantity increases because the products are cheaper and people buy more. And as the prices increase, the demand quantity decreases. But because the money supply is relatively constant in the SOV, then the prices are relatively constant, and this red line will shrink into this green line. So if we superimpose the supply and demand curves, we get this graph. You can see that where quantity demand equals to the quantity supply, QD equal QS, this is known as the equilibrium quantity and would occur at the equilibrium price. Because in the SOV, the money supply is mostly constant and the prices are mostly constant, then you'll have supply and demand that are nearly matched and will be already at the equilibrium point and remain at the equilibrium point. This brings us to the following question. What is the normal annual global consumption? What about the current annual global consumption? Do you consider it to be normal? If it is normal, then the current consumption would be used as the normal annual consumption. But is current consumption sustainable? Does it promote planet stewardship? If the answer is yes, then start with it as a baseline for normal. But if it is unsustainable, then decrease it. And if it's insufficient, then increase it. So if it is ecologically acceptable, the SOV can accept primary products at 2 times or 3 times of current AGC. This will create a reservoir of primary goods and money that will be invaluable in cases of natural or man-made disasters and will increase the money supply that can be used to fund investments. But all of this would be with real money, with real value that is actually present as a result of excess production. This is in stark contrast to what we have now, where currency is created out of debt. This is phantom money that goes from the future that does not really exist, but yet is used in the present effectively to exploit people and nations. This brings us to savings. How can you logically save money, save value? Well, if production equals consumption, then you will have no savings. If production is greater than consumption, then you can have savings. And if consumption is greater than production, then you'll be in debt. The SOV is a production based economy grounded in economic truth, not financial fantasies. In the SOV, you can only save by making real things, not imaginary things. The only natural and logical way of saving is the result of overproduction. So, how much can you save from production? 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years extra? Note that if you do not overproduce but yet you save, then someone is your slave. Let's take a closer look at savings in numbers to keep things in perspective. Table 10.1, just like Table 9.1, assumes a baseline daily currency production of 100 billion V. So these are 100 billion V that are created every day but are also consumed every day and thus eliminated from circulation. However, if you recall, at baseline, the SOV allows 1 year worth of primary products to be available at all times. This will translate into about 364 days of money that is not consumed and remains available. This is the natural amount of savings that are possible from production or overproduction. These are real savings, not fake savings. If you assume that all 8 billion people on this planet are saving equally, that is, if you divide the total savings, which is about 36.4 trillion V, divided by 8 billion people, this will give you 4,553 V of savings per person. So what would that amount of savings do? This will be enough money for one person to eat for about 12.4 years. Now, Table 10.2 shows us what happens when you increase the daily currency production to 200 billion V. This is worth of 2 years of primary products being accepted by the SOV. This will increase the savings per person. If every person again is saving equally on the planet, that will also increase the amount of years that will feed them to 24.9 years. And if you increase the daily currency production to 300 billion V, then each person can theoretically save enough money to eat for 37.4 years. Again, we're assuming that the savings are equal among all 8 billion people on the planet. But in reality, some people may be able to save more, or some people may be able to save less. Currently, in some countries, people have no savings at all. And in other countries, people have a lot of savings. So who is in charge of the SOV? Who is the operating body? This is a major concern, right? The Universal Currency Organization shall be created. But have no fear, it's not a central planner and has no control over your money. It is designed in such a way that it cannot be captured by any nation, no matter how big it is. And most importantly, it has no discretionary powers. Actually, it has very limited powers, much less than a central bank. It oversees the rules explained previously in our presentation rather than create policy. It cannot create money at will out of thin air. It has no access to your money and cannot tell you what to do with your money. You can do whatever you want with your money because it is honest money. You earned it because you created value. The UCO is an independent international body, and no court has jurisdiction over it or can force it to do anything that affects your money or your account. Nobody's account can be canceled or frozen. This will be a structural design built in the system. The UCO shall represent all countries in the world. So if we assume there are 195 countries in the world, then each country will have a representative that will participate in the election of the 7-member board of trustees of the UCO. It's up to each country individually to decide how they want to elect their representative. Their government can select someone, or their people can elect someone directly. It's up to them. But once we have those 195 representatives from each country, then they will meet and elect 7 members to serve as the board of trustees of the ECO. Each representative from each country will have a weighted impact based on the population of his country. In Table 11, instead of putting all 195 countries, I just chose 5 countries for simplicity. So you see here that Nigeria, for example, and Canada, which are represented in pink, they both voted for the Nigerian representative. If you add both countries' population, you'll have the total number of votes. In this case, it is 278 million people or votes. Whereas Switzerland, Nepal, and Brazil, which are highlighted in light green, their added population will yield 256 million votes. So in this case, the Nigerian representative will win a seat on the UCO Board of Trustees. Note that each country can elect only one UCO board member, and the first 7 who will win are the ones who have the highest number of total votes. This way, even if you have one country with a very large population, it can only affect the election of one board member. You would still have 6 more seats that this country will have zero impact, since it only votes once. Consider 2 large countries, each one with 1.5 billion people. If they both vote together, they will get 3 billion people or votes. But in that case, they can only elect one board member. That's it. So this system of election is very democratic and very fair, and it prevents capture of the organization by one big country, or even multiple big countries. So all countries count, and they get to select their own representative, and they all participate in the election of the board based on their population, and the first 7 wins. You cannot create a better system than that. So how can we transition from our current obsolete system of currencies to our proposed system of value exclusively? One way is to ask producers to gradually cease utilizing fiat currencies over a period of 5 years. Any producer in the first year of transition can allocate 20% of their production to be sold in V only, and the rest in other currencies that they usually use. They can increase their allocation of sales in V annually by 20% until the 5th year, when 100% of sales would be in V. Let's recall a few concepts that we encountered earlier in this presentation. An economic system exists because of the energy used to perform work in that system. So if we all sit down here on our chairs watching YouTube videos and do nothing else for a year, there will be no economy, since no energy is spent to do useful work. We quantify our energy that is used to produce useful work in terms of money or currency, and we circulate it among us. In our system of value, the energy we spend has a value, V, which we quantify in terms of money, M. And in the SOV, currency, C, is equal to money. Money and currency are the same thing, unlike what we have now under our current monetary system. And the total currency is N times V, which is the number of V's produced from real production, which is effectively the energy that the human population as a whole produce in the economy. Let's go over a few points that are worth thinking about. First, the global debt, which is borrowing by governments, businesses, and people, is steadily increasing and reached 348 trillion US dollars in 2025. What does that mean? This can be interpreted in a number of ways, but 2 things stand out. First, the fact that global debt is steadily increasing over the years suggests it's not going to be paid back. Second, and most importantly, this means that a lot of people did an enormous amount of work but were paid with money that does not really exist and will never truly exist, because it's never going to be paid back. They tricked you to work in exchange for fake money that does not represent real value. It is created out of debt that will not be paid back. Isn't this how you trick people into economic slavery? What about GDP? In the SOV, global GDP simply equals the annual currency production, ACP, which is easily and automatically measured by the system at any time. You can also split it by any region if you want. But unlike the GDP, the real ACP is the same thing as the nominal ACP, as there is no inflation in the SOV. The SOV will have complete economic data in real time. Every metric you can think of is measured and displayed for the entire human population to see and analyze in real time with tables and graphs. It's a fully transparent system. What about the economic viability of a product? If any product cannot generate at least 1 V per person per day, then this means producing it cannot even feed 1 person. Hence, it's not economically feasible to produce that product. More details of how to practically implement the SOV and much more are in this book to your left, so you may want to read it. So where do we proceed from here? We do need to develop the economy app, or VAP, but that should not be a big deal. There are way more complex software in existence, so developing it is not an issue. Well, that's it, folks. That's how you design a new, fair, and logical international monetary system. You start by seeking the truth. You ground your design in economic realities. Please note that I have created many videos on this channel as a follow-up to this presentation. I think you will not just enjoy them, you will also learn from them. And they will clarify some of the points mentioned in this presentation even further. It would be hard to understand them if you did not already watch this video and knew what we are talking about. Thank you for watching, and welcome to Value-Based Economics.